Malik Hale had 30 seconds to make a choice that would either save his family's future or destroy it forever. Standing at that crosswalk, watching a young woman collapse to the pavement while pedestrians stepped around her like she was nothing more than an obstacle, he knew with brutal clarity that whatever he decided in the next heartbeat would define the rest of his life. The job interview that could pull him and his daughter out of poverty was 4 blocks away. He was already cutting it close, but the woman's eyes, desperate, frightened, struggling to focus, locked onto his. And Malik felt the world slow to a terrible, crystalline moment of truth. Before we dive into this story about sacrifice, second chances, and the unexpected ways our smallest choices can reshape our entire world, I want to invite you to stay with me until the very end. Drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel and connecting with all of you. And if this story moves you, hit that like button. It genuinely helps me continue bringing you these narratives every week. Now, let me tell you about the day Malik Hale learned that sometimes losing everything is the only way to gain what truly matters. P. The morning had started with promise, which should have been Malik's first warning. In his experience, hope was usually just a setup for disappointment. "Daddy, you look fancy." Imani stood in the doorway of their cramped bathroom, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2. At 7 years old, she was small for her age, something the pediatrician had mentioned with concern during their last visit, the one Malik had barely been able to afford, even with the community clinic's sliding scale fees. Her warm brown skin still held the softness of sleep, and her natural curls were flattened on one side, sticking up in the back where she'd rolled around in the night. Her pajamas were getting too short at the ankles. He'd need to find her new ones soon, maybe at the thrift store on Morrison Street. Malik adjusted his tie, the only tie he owned, and tried to make his smile reach his eyes. "Big interview today, sweetheart, remember? The one that's going to make everything better." Imani's voice carried that particular quality of childhood hope that simultaneously broke and mended his heart. "That's the one." He crouched down to her level, ignoring the protest from his knees. 3 years of working double shifts doing manual labor had left their mark on his 32-year-old body, on his shoulders, on his lower back, in the way his dark brown hands sometimes stiffened around a broom handle after too many hours. He was a black single dad in his 30s, and life had been asking him to carry more than his share since the day everything fell apart. "Mrs. Chen is going to pick you up from school today and keep you until I get back." Okay. It might be a little later than usual." Imani's face fell slightly. She hated when he worked late. Hated the parade of neighbors and friends who cycled through babysitting duties because Malik couldn't afford consistent childcare. He hated it too. Hated the charity of it. The way it made him feel like he was failing at the most basic requirement of fatherhood. "But you'll come get me for bedtime?" she asked, her small hand finding his. "Always." He kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of the discount shampoo he'd watered down to make it last longer. "I promise." The promise hung in the air between them, weighted with all the other promises he'd made and kept through sheer force of will over the past 3 years. Since the accident that had taken his wife Tiana and left him a widowed single father at 29. Since the medical bills from her final week in the hospital had devoured their savings and forced them out of their small house and into this 2-room apartment in the cheapest part of the city. Since he'd cobbled together a life from temp jobs, night shifts, and whatever work he could find that would still let him be present for his daughter. This interview was supposed to change all of that. The position at Sterling & Associates was entry level, administrative coordinator in their operations department, but it came with benefits. Real benefits. Health insurance that would cover Imani's dental work, the cavities he'd been putting off because the dentist wanted $800 he didn't have. A salary that would let them move somewhere safer, somewhere Imani could play outside without Malik constantly watching for broken glass and worse. Stability, security, a future that looked like something more than just survival. Malik had applied on a whim, not really believing he had a shot. His resume was a patchwork of short-term positions, nothing that screamed promising candidate. His associate's degree from the community college felt almost quaint, compared to what he imagined other applicants brought to the table. But then he'd gotten the call, and the woman on the phone had sounded genuinely interested in his application. And suddenly, this impossible thing had felt possible. He'd researched the company obsessively. Sterling and Associates was a mid-size consulting firm with an excellent reputation and a corporate culture that emphasized growth from within. People who started in entry-level positions didn't stay there. If they worked hard, if they proved themselves, opportunities opened up. Malik knew how to work hard. It was the only thing he'd ever really been good at. The morning commute took 2 buses and 45 minutes. Malik had timed it 3 times over the past week, mapping out every variable, every potential delay. He'd built in a 30-minute buffer. He was not going to be late. This was too important. The city moved around him in its usual chaotic rhythm. July heat shimmered off the pavement, making the air feel thick and hostile. Malik's dress shirt, purchased specifically for this interview from a discount store, was already beginning to stick to his back. He debated whether to wear the jacket that completed his only suit, ultimately deciding that showing up sweaty would be worse than looking slightly underdressed. The first bus arrived exactly on schedule. Malik found a seat near the back and pulled out his phone, reviewing the notes he'd made about the company. Revenue growth, recent expansions, key leadership changes. He'd memorized it all. When the interviewer asked why he wanted to work at Sterling and Associates, he'd be ready. He'd be perfect. This your first time interviewing there? Malik looked up to find an older woman in the seat across from him, her clear-throat, kind face creased with curiosity. That obvious? He asked, managing a rueful smile. You've got that look. Same one my son had when he interviewed for his teaching position. She nodded at the folder in his lap, the one containing extra copies of his resume. You'll do fine. I can tell you've got an honest face. The comment caught Malik off guard. Thank you, he said. I hope you're right. Mother's intuition, she said with a wink, never fails. Malik wanted to believe her. He needed to believe that something about him communicated competence and reliability, that the hiring manager would see past his fragmented work history to the person underneath. Someone who showed up, who delivered, who would treat this opportunity like the lifeline it was. The bus delivered him to the transfer point with 5 minutes to spare. The second bus was running 2 minutes behind, which still left him a comfortable margin. Everything was going according to plan. Which was when his phone rang. Imani's school. His stomach dropped even before he answered. Mr. Hale, this is Nurse Patterson from Riverside Elementary. Is Imani okay? The question came out more sharply than he intended. She's fine, the nurse assured him quickly. Just a little incident on the playground. She scraped her knee pretty badly and she's asking for you. I don't think it needs stitches, but she's quite upset. Malik closed his eyes, calculating. 20 minutes to the school, 20 minutes back, plus however long it took to calm Imani down. He'd lose his buffer completely. Might even be late. Can I talk to her? He asked. A rustling sound, and then Imani's tear-choked voice. Daddy. Hey, sweetheart, Nurse Patterson says you took a tumble. It hurts. She was crying in earnest now, the way she only did when she was genuinely frightened. I want you to come. Every instinct in Malik's body screamed at him to go to her. But the rational part of his mind, the part that had kept them afloat for 3 years, knew that this interview could change their lives, could mean better schools for Imani, better healthcare, better everything. Baby, I know it's scary, he said, forcing his voice to stay steady, but Nurse Patterson is going to take excellent care of you. She's going to clean it up and put a bandage on it, and it's going to feel so much better. But I want you. Her voice broke, and Malik felt something crack in his chest. I know, he said softly. I know you do, and I want to be there. He swallowed hard. But this interview, Imani, it's really important. It's going to help us help you. Can you be brave for me? Just for a little while. The silence on the other end felt like judgment. Finally, Imani sniffled. Okay, that's my girl. Malik exhaled like he'd been holding his breath underwater. I'll come straight to school after the interview and we'll get ice cream on the way home. The good kind with the chocolate chips you like. Promise? Promise. When the nurse came back on the line, Malik gave her permission to treat the scrape and hung up, feeling like the worst father in the world. The second bus arrived and he boarded it in a daze, trying to shake off the guilt. The interview was at 2 o'clock. It was currently 1:15. He was fine. Everything was fine. The bus lurched through midday traffic, hitting every red light as if the universe was testing his resolve. Malik forced himself to breathe slowly, to review his talking points, to focus on the opportunity ahead rather than the small voice in his head that kept replaying Imani's tears. By the time he stepped off the bus at 1:40, his shirt was soaked through with sweat and his nerves felt stripped raw. The Sterling and Associates building rose before him, all glass and steel and corporate promise. Malik straightened his tie, wiped his palms on his pants, and started walking. 3 blocks. He had 20 minutes. Plenty of time. The crosswalk signal turned red just as he approached the intersection at the second block. Malik stopped, using the moment to check his reflection in a store window. Presentable, professional, like someone who had their life together. That was when he saw her. At first, she was just another pedestrian waiting for the light to change. A young woman in professional attire, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her expression distant and strained. But as Malik watched, her posture shifted. She wavered, one hand reaching out as if searching for something to steady herself. The light changed. The crowd surged forward into the crosswalk. The young woman took 2 steps and collapsed. It happened so quickly that most people didn't even register it. Those who did simply moved around her, a river of humanity parting around an obstacle. Someone muttered something about day drinking. Someone else laughed. Malik stood frozen at the curb, watching this woman sprawled on the blistering pavement, clearly in distress, clearly needing help. The interview was 2 blocks away, 15 minutes. He looked up at the Sterling and Associates building, visible now above the lower structures, its windows reflecting the afternoon sun. He looked back at the woman. She was trying to push herself up, her movements uncoordinated and weak. As he watched, she lifted her head and her eyes, wide with confusion and fear, found his. The moment stretched and crystallized. Malik could feel his future branching into 2 distinct paths, could sense with absolute certainty that whatever choice he made in the next 5 seconds would alter the fundamental trajectory of his life. Every rational calculation said to keep walking. She was probably fine. Someone else would help. He had his daughter to think about, his future to secure. This interview was everything. But those eyes, the desperate, frightened plea in them. Malik had made a lot of hard choices in his life. He'd chosen to marry Tiana even though everyone said they were too young. He'd chosen to keep going after she died, even when the grief felt like it would crush him. He'd chosen every single day for 3 years to show up for Imani, no matter how tired he was, no matter how hopeless things seemed. He'd never chosen his own comfort over someone else's crisis. He couldn't start now. Malik crossed the street at a run. Hey, it's okay, I've got you. He knelt beside her, one hand supporting her shoulder. Up close, he could see she was young, mid-20s maybe, and clearly unwell. Her skin was clammy, her breathing shallow. Can you tell me your name? Emily. The word came out slurred. Something's wrong. Okay, Emily, my name's Malik. We're going to get you out of this intersection, all right? He glanced up to see the light was about to change again. Traffic already revving their engines. Can you stand if I help you? I think so. He got an arm around her waist and hauled her upright, supporting most of her weight as he half carried her to the sidewalk. A few people glanced their way, but no one stopped. Malik maneuvered her to a bench in the shade of a bus shelter and helped her sit. When did you last eat? He asked, already pulling out his phone to call 911. No, ambulance. Emily grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Please, I got dizzy. The heat. I haven't been sleeping well. You collapsed in the middle of a crosswalk. I know. I know it looks bad. She was breathing more steadily now, color returning to her face. But I promise I'm okay. I just need to sit for a minute. Malik studied her, trying to assess whether she was genuinely recovering or just convincing herself she was fine. He'd seen Tiana do the same thing in the weeks before the accident, downplaying symptoms that turned out to be catastrophic. At least let me get you some water, he said. There was a convenience store half a block down. Malik jogged there, acutely aware that every minute was eating into his interview window. He grabbed the coldest water bottle from the cooler and paid with bills from the emergency cash he kept in his wallet. Money that was supposed to last them through the end of the week. When he returned, Emily had her head between her knees, breathing deeply. Well, here. He twisted the cap off and pressed the bottle into her hand. Small sips. She drank gratefully, and they sat in silence for a moment, watching the city move around them with indifferent haste. You don't have to stay, Emily said finally. I'm sure you have somewhere to be. Malik checked his watch. 1:58. The Sterling and Associates building was still 2 blocks away. It's fine, he heard himself say. It's not fine. Emily's voice was steadier now. I saw your face when I grabbed your wrist. You're going to be late for something important. Not as important as making sure you're okay. Emily turned to look at him fully for the first time, really seeing him. That's a kind lie. It's not a lie. Malik wasn't entirely sure that was true, but he committed to it anyway. What kind of person would I be if I left you here? A practical one. But there was something in her expression. Gratitude mixed with a bone-deep weariness that Malik recognized from his own mirror. What's your name again? She asked. Malik Hale. Well, Malik Hale, she said, taking another sip of water. You're either the best person I've met in this city or the worst judge of your own self-interest. Maybe both, Malik said, and despite everything, he smiled. That's probably fair. They sat there as the minutes ticked past 2 o'clock. Emily's breathing continued to steady, her color improving with each passing moment. Malik found himself studying the way people moved through the city, each absorbed in their own trajectory, their own urgencies. How easy it would have been to be one of them. How tempting. You want to tell me what's really going on? He asked. Emily was quiet for a long moment. You ever feel like you're drowning? She said finally. But everyone around you thinks you're swimming just fine. Yeah, Malik said softly. Yeah, I know that feeling. I haven't slept more than 3 hours a night in weeks. I'm working 16-hour days trying to prove something I'm not even sure I believe anymore. And today She gestured helplessly. My body decided it was done, I guess. What are you trying to prove? That I earned my position. That I'm not just there because of who my father is. Emily laughed, a bitter sound. Ironic, right? Most people would kill for the advantages I have, and I'm literally killing myself trying to prove I don't need them. Malik thought about the interview he was missing, about the opportunity that had felt like his only chance at a better life. Sounds lonely, he said. It is. Emily met his eyes. Which is probably why I'm telling all this to a complete stranger who saved me from getting run over. Happy to listen, Malik said. And he meant it, even though his phone now read 2:15, and he knew with sick certainty that his interview window had closed. They talked for another 20 minutes. Emily told him about the pressure of living up to impossible expectations, about a father whose love felt conditional on achievement, about the exhaustion of maintaining a perfect facade. Malik found himself sharing pieces of his own story. Imani, the accident, the long climb from grief towards something like hope. When Emily finally stood steady on her feet, she looked at Malik with an expression he couldn't quite read. You missed your interview, didn't you? There was no point lying. Yeah. God, I'm so sorry. Don't be. You needed help. That's what matters. That's not what matters to your daughter, though, or your bank account. Emily pulled out her phone. Let me at least call you a car to wherever you need to go. I'm fine. Bus works just as well. Malik. Her voice was firm. You gave up something important to help me. Let me do this one small thing. Pride warred with practicality. Practicality won barely. Okay, he said. Thank you. The car arrived within minutes. One of those sleek black sedans that Malik had only ever seen from the outside. Emily held the door open for him. I mean it, she said. Thank you for stopping, for staying, for... She gestured vaguely. For treating me like a person instead of a problem. Take care of yourself, Malik said. Really take care of yourself. The world needs people who are willing to stop and help. Can't do that if you work yourself into the ground. Emily smiled, sad and knowing. Right back at you. As the car pulled away, Malik gave the driver the address of Riverside Elementary. He'd meant what he said about ice cream. A promise was a promise, even if he could barely afford it now, especially because he could barely afford it now. His phone buzzed with a notification. An email from Sterling and Associates. Dear Mr. Hale, we regret to inform you that due to your absence from today's scheduled interview, we have moved forward with other candidates. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Malik read it twice, letting the words sink in, the finality of them, the door closing on the future he'd imagined. He should feel devastated, angry, something. Instead, he just felt tired, and underneath the exhaustion, something else. Something he didn't quite have words for yet. Not regret, exactly. Not quite peace either. The certainty, maybe, that he'd made the only choice he could have lived with. The car glided through traffic toward Riverside Elementary, where his daughter waited with a scraped knee and the infinite faith that her father would always come when she needed him. Malik leaned his head against the window and watched the city blur past, thinking about the woman he'd helped, and the opportunity he'd lost, and the strange, immutable fact that sometimes the most important decisions we make are the ones we never really think about at all. We just act, and then we live with the consequences. Imani was waiting in the nurse's office when he arrived, her knee sporting a large bandage decorated with cartoon bears. Her face lit up when she saw him, and she launched herself into his arms with enough force to nearly knock him over. You came, she said into his shoulder. I promised, didn't I? Malik held her tight, breathing in the scent of playground dust and childhood. How's the knee, warrior? Hurts less now. She pulled back to look at him. Did you get the job? Malik hesitated, then decided on the truth. I didn't make it to the interview, sweetheart. Why not? Someone needed help. I stopped to make sure they were okay. Imani considered this with the seriousness that children bring to moral questions. Was it the right thing to do? I think so. Yeah. She took his hand, complete confidence in her voice. Then that's okay. You'll get another chance. Malik wished he had half her faith, but he smiled and nodded and thanked the nurse, and they walked out of the school into the brutal afternoon heat. Ice cream? Imani asked hopefully. Ice cream, Malik confirmed. They stopped at the corner store, the one with the good ice cream bars that cost twice what they should. Malik bought 2, chocolate chip for Imani, plain vanilla for himself because it was cheaper, and they sat on the curb eating them while the city rushed past. Daddy. Imani's voice was small. Yeah, sweetheart. I'm glad you helped that person, even if it meant missing your interview. She licked melting ice cream off her fingers. That's what heroes do. Malik felt something break open in his chest, some tight knot of anxiety and regret loosening just enough to let him breathe. You know what? He said. I'm glad too. And sitting there on that dirty curb with his daughter, sticky with ice cream and facing an uncertain future, Malik realized he meant it. He'd lost an opportunity. But he'd kept something more important. The part of himself that would always choose compassion over convenience. That would stop for a stranger in crisis, even when it cost him everything. The world needed people like that. Imani needed a father like that. He needed to be that person more than he needed any job. The realization didn't make their circumstances any easier. They still lived in a cramped apartment. He still had to figure out where next month's rent was coming from. The bills weren't going away just because he'd done the right thing. But for the first time in a long time, Malik felt something other than desperation driving him forward. He felt like himself. That night, after Imani was asleep, Malik sat at their small kitchen table and opened his laptop. He needed to start job hunting again, needed to figure out the next move. But first, almost without thinking about it, he typed Emily Sterling and Associates into the search bar. The results loaded and Malik stared at the screen. Emily Carter, Assistant Director of Operations. Sterling and Associates, daughter of Richard Carter, CEO and founder. The woman he'd helped wasn't just some random professional having a bad day. She was the daughter of the man who would have been his boss. The daughter of the person who had ultimate authority over every hiring decision in the company. Malik sat back, processing this information. Would it have changed anything if he'd known? Would he have stayed with her longer, been more solicitous, tried to leverage the moment into some kind of advantage? The thought made him feel vaguely ill. No. He'd helped her because she needed help. The rest didn't matter. But it was a strange coincidence, a small city getting smaller. Malik closed the laptop and went to bed and dreamed of crosswalks and interviews and choices that echoed forward in ways he couldn't predict. He had no way of knowing that in a sleek office across town, Emily Carter was sitting at her desk at nearly midnight, reviewing security footage from the intersection where she'd collapsed, watching a man in a cheap suit stop when no one else would, watching him stay when he clearly needed to leave. She had asked security to identify him, and they'd found his interview appointment in the system, had cross-referenced it with his resume, his application, his entire professional history. Malik Hale, single father, string of short-term jobs, associate's degree from the community college. Nothing that would normally make him stand out. Everything that made him extraordinary. Emily made a note in her phone, then another in her calendar. She had an idea, but it would require her father's approval, and Richard Carter didn't make exceptions for people based on sentiment. She'd need to make the case carefully, strategically. But if there was one thing Emily had learned in her 25 years, it was how to get what she wanted. And right now, she wanted to find out if the man who'd stopped to help her was as remarkable as he seemed, or if she was just desperate enough to see heroism in a simple act of human decency. The days that followed had a particular quality of grayness that Malik had come to associate with setbacks. Not the dramatic darkness of genuine crisis, but the flat, muted exhaustion of having to start over again from a position slightly worse than before. He spent Monday morning on the phone with temp agencies, his resume pulled up on the laptop screen while Imani watched cartoons in the next room. The apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in with the weight of bills that wouldn't wait, and opportunities that had already passed. Mr. Hale, I'm looking at your file here and I see you completed the warehouse assignment back in April. How did that go? The recruiter's voice was professionally pleasant, the kind of tone that managed to be both friendly and completely impersonal. Fine, good. They offered to extend it, but the night shift schedule wasn't compatible with my daughter's school hours. Malik had already explained this twice to two different people at the same agency, but he kept his voice patient. I'm looking for something with daytime hours, stable if possible. Of course. The challenge is that most of our stable placements require more specialized skills or longer-term availability. A pause, the sound of typing. I do have a 2-week data entry position starting Wednesday. Pay is $14 an hour, downtown location. $14 an hour. Malik did the math automatically. After taxes and bus fare, barely enough to cover their basic expenses. Nothing left over for Imani's dental work or the security deposit on a better apartment or any of the 1,000 small emergencies that constituted their normal life. I'll take it, he said. Excellent. I'll email you the details and the client contact information. And Mr. Hale, keep checking back with us. Things come up all the time. Malik thanked her and hung up, staring at the ceiling and trying to summon something like optimism. 2 weeks of work. Then he'd be back to the same position, making these same calls, hoping for something better while settling for whatever came. The email from Sterling and Associates sat in his inbox like a small monument to what might have been. He should delete it, probably move on. But something kept him from clicking the button. Some stubborn part of his brain that wanted to remember the feeling of possibility even if it had only lasted a few hours. Daddy, I'm hungry. Imani appeared in the doorway, her rabbit tucked under one arm. Malik checked the time. Nearly noon, and he'd been so absorbed in job hunting that he'd forgotten about lunch. How about grilled cheese with the good cheese or the regular cheese? The good cheese cost $3 more per package. Malik had been stretching the regular cheese for 2 weeks now, rationing it carefully. Good cheese, he decided. Special occasion. What's the occasion? Imani asked, eyes bright. Monday. Malik managed to smile. Monday's occasion enough. Imani giggled, the sound bright enough to cut through some of the grayness. They were halfway through lunch when his phone rang with an unknown number. Malik almost didn't answer, but he did. Mr. Hale, this is Jennifer Walsh from Sterling and Associates. Malik's hand tightened on the phone. Yes? I'm calling on behalf of our executive team. We'd like to invite you to come in for a meeting this Thursday at 10 a.m. if you're clear's throat available. For a moment, Malik couldn't process the words. A meeting. Not an interview, but still. I'm sorry, he said. I thought the email said you'd move forward with other candidates. Yes, well, circumstances have changed. Are you available Thursday? Every instinct told Malik this was strange. companies didn't reach back out to candidates they'd already rejected, especially candidates who'd completely missed their scheduled interviews. But he wasn't in a position to question good fortune, however unexpected. "Yes," he said, "I'm available." "Wonderful. I'll send you a confirmation email with the details. We're looking forward to meeting you, Mr. Hale." After she hung up, Malik sat staring at his half-eaten sandwich, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Amani watched him with curious eyes. "Who was that?" "Remember the job interview I missed? The one where I stopped to help someone?" "Uh-huh. They want to meet with me after all." Amani's face split into a grin. "See? I told you you'd get another chance." Malik reached over and ruffled her curls, marveling at her uncomplicated faith in cosmic justice. You did say that, didn't you?" The confirmation email arrived minutes later, and Malik read it 3 times, looking for some catch or condition he'd missed. But it was straightforward. Thursday, 10 a.m., ask for Jennifer Walsh at the reception desk. He'd be meeting with the executive team, which seemed like overkill for an entry-level administrative position. But maybe that was just how Sterling and Associates operated. The rest of Monday and all of Tuesday passed in a fog of anticipation and anxiety. Malik researched the company again, memorized new details, practiced answers to potential questions. He picked up the 2-week data entry position on Wednesday as a backup plan, spending 8 hours inputting spreadsheet data in a windowless office while trying not to obsess about Thursday's meeting. Wednesday night, he laid out his suit and went over his notes one more time. Amani had already gone to bed, exhausted from a full day of summer camp that Malik was paying for with money he didn't really have. He justified the expense by telling himself she needed the structure, the social interaction with other kids. The truth was, he needed her to be occupied and happy while he tried to hold their lives together with increasingly frayed thread. Sleep didn't come easily. Malik lay in the darkness of their small bedroom, listening to Imani's steady breathing from her bed across the room, and wondered what tomorrow would bring. Second chances were rare enough in his experience that he didn't quite trust them. But he'd learned a long time ago that you didn't refuse opportunities just because you didn't understand them. You showed up. You did your best. You dealt with whatever came next. Thursday morning arrived with the same oppressive heat that had characterized the entire summer. Malik dressed carefully, double-checked his appearance, and arranged for Mrs. Chen to pick Imani up from camp. He allowed himself an extra 30 minutes of buffer time, determined not to let anything derail him today. The bus ride felt longer than it should have, every red light a personal affront. But Malik arrived at the Sterling and Associates building at 9:40, sweating through his shirt, but present and accounted for. The lobby was exactly as impressive as he remembered from his research photos. All marble and steel and carefully curated modern art that probably cost more than Malik made in a year. He felt briefly the familiar tightening in his chest, the feeling of being a black man in a space built to make people like him second guess whether they belonged. He pushed it down. He'd learned how to keep walking anyway. "I'm here to see Jennifer Walsh," he told the receptionist, a polished woman in her 30s who looked like she'd never had a hair out of place in her life. "Malik Hale, I have at 10 o'clock. She typed something into her computer, smiled professionally. "Mr. Hale, yes. Miss Walsh will be right down. Please have a seat." The waiting area featured chairs that were somehow both beautiful and uncomfortable, clearly designed for aesthetics rather than actual human use. Malik perched on the edge of one, his folder of resume copies resting on his knees, and tried to project an air of calm competence. He'd been sitting there for maybe 3 minutes when the elevator opened and 2 people emerged. The first was a woman in her 40s, black hair cut in a sharp bob, wearing a suit that screamed executive authority. The second was Emily. Malik stood without thinking, his brain struggling to catch up with what he was seeing. Emily looked different than she had on the crosswalk, healthier, more composed, her professional armor firmly in place. But her eyes held the same tired weariness he'd seen when she'd collapsed. Those eyes went wide when they landed on him. "Mr. Hale," the older woman extended her hand. "I'm Jennifer Walsh, Chief Operating Officer. Thank you for coming in today." Malik shook her hand, acutely aware that Emily was staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Thank you for the invitation. I believe you've already met our Assistant Director of Operations, Emily Carter." We've met, Emily said quietly. Hello, Malik. Emily! Malik nodded, trying to keep his confusion off his face. Jennifer glanced between them with sharp intelligence. Why don't we head upstairs where we can talk more comfortably? Mr. Hale, can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? Water would be great, thank you. They rode the elevator to the 7th floor in silence that felt heavy with unasked questions. Malik kept his eyes forward, hyper-aware of Emily standing just to his left. What was happening here? Had she requested this meeting? Was this some kind of elaborate thank you for helping her? Or something else entirely? The conference room they entered was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a table that could easily seat 20 people. Abstract art that Malik suspected was probably famous if you knew anything about art. Jennifer gestured to a chair, and Malik sat, accepting the water bottle an assistant materialized with. I'm sure you're wondering why we asked you here, Jennifer began, settling into the chair across from him. Emily took the seat beside her, her expression carefully neutral, especially after the circumstances of last Friday. The question had crossed my mind, Malik admitted. Jennifer smiled. I appreciate directness, Mr. Hale, so let me be direct with you. Emily came to me earlier this week with an unusual request. She asked me to review your application file personally and to arrange this meeting. Malik looked at Emily, who met his gaze steadily. After what happened on Friday, Emily said, I was curious about the man who stopped to help me. Security footage helped us identify you, and we found your interview appointment in our system. When I saw that you'd been rejected for missing the interview, missing it because you were helping me, I felt I owed you at least a conversation. You don't owe me anything, Malik said. You needed help. That's all that mattered. That's exactly the response that made me want to have this conversation. Emily leaned forward slightly. Malik, I've worked in corporate environments my entire adult life. I've seen how people operate when they think someone might be useful to them, and I've seen how they operate when they think someone is irrelevant. Do you know how many people walked past me that day? How many saw me on the ground and decided I wasn't their problem? Too many, Malik said quietly. Every single person except you. Jennifer cut in, her tone matter of fact. That's the point, Mr. Hale. They didn't. You did. And while I'll admit that Emily's personal interest in your application is what brought you to my attention, what kept my attention was your actual resume. Malik blinked. My resume? It's not exactly impressive. It's not traditional, Jennifer corrected, but traditional isn't always what we need. I see someone who's held 7 different positions in 3 years, but never quit a single one until the contract ended or circumstances forced a change. I see someone who completed an associate's degree while working full-time and raising a child alone. I see adaptability, resilience, and work ethic. Those qualities are harder to find than you might think. What Jennifer is trying to say, Emily added, is that we'd like to offer you a position, not the one you originally applied for, but something we think might be a better fit. Malik felt like the conversation had jumped ahead without him. I don't understand. Jennifer slid a folder across the table. We have an opening in our operations department for a program coordinator. It's a step above the administrative role you applied for with corresponding salary and benefits. The position requires someone who can manage multiple priorities, communicate effectively across departments, and problem solve on the fly. Based on your work history and what Emily observed last Friday, we believe you'd excel at it. Malik opened the folder with hands that weren't quite steady. The job description was dense with corporate language, but the salary figure at the top made his breath catch. $48,000 a year. Benefits starting after 90 days. Paid time off. Professional development opportunities. It was more than he'd made in his best year ever. It was more than he dared to imagine. This is incredibly generous, he managed. But I have to ask, is this a real position, or is it being created because Emily feels guilty about what happened? The question hung in the air for a moment. Jennifer's eyebrows rose, and Emily looked briefly startled before a small smile tugged at her lips. I like him, Emily said to Jennifer. I can see why, Jennifer replied, then turned back to Malik. It's a legitimate position, Mr. Hale. We've been trying to fill it for 6 weeks. 3 candidates have made it to final rounds, and none of them were quite right. Emily advocated for giving you a shot. Yes, but I make hiring decisions based on merit, not sentiment. I wouldn't offer you this role if I didn't believe you could handle it. The truth is, Emily said, I saw something in you that day that I haven't seen in any of our polished, perfectly credentialed candidates. You made a choice that cost you something real, and you made it without hesitation. That kind of character matters in ways that don't always show up on a resume. Malik looked down at the job description, the words blurring slightly as his mind raced through implications and possibilities. This could change everything. This could mean stability for Imani, could mean health insurance and dental care, and an apartment in a neighborhood where she could play outside safely. This could mean a future that looked like something other than perpetual struggle. But it also felt too easy, too convenient, too much like charity dressed up as opportunity. Can I be honest with you both? Malik asked. Please, Jennifer said. I'm not used to things working out. I'm not used to people going out of their way to help me, especially people with the kind of power and resources you have. He met Emily's eyes. And I'm worried that if I take this position, I'll always wonder if I earned it, or if I'm here because of a chance encounter at a crosswalk. Emily was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was soft. I ain't sure, Rose. I understand that concern. I've spent my entire career trying to prove I'm not just here because of my last name. So let me ask you something. If we'd never met, if you'd made that interview on Friday and interviewed with the hiring manager for the administrative position, do you think you would have gotten the job? Malik considered the question honestly. I don't know. Maybe. I'm a hard worker and I'm good at what I do, but there were probably other candidates with more relevant experience, better education, stronger networks. Exactly, Emily said. The traditional hiring process favors people who already have advantages. Credentials, connections, the luxury of time to build the perfect resume. You're right that you might not have gotten that job through conventional means, but does that mean you don't deserve a job, or does it mean the conventional system is flawed? I think, Jennifer interjected, what Emily is trying to say is that every hire requires someone to take a chance on someone else. Usually that chance goes to people who fit a certain profile. We're choosing to take a chance on you based on different criteria. That doesn't make it charity. It makes it a different kind of bet. Malik absorbed this, turning it over in his mind. There was logic to it, even if it still felt uncomfortably close to special treatment. What if I'm not good at the job? He asked. What if I can't handle the workload or the responsibilities? Then we'll address it the same as we would with any employee, Jennifer said briskly, businesslike. You'll have a 90-day probationary period. During that time, you'll receive training, mentorship, and regular feedback. If at the end of 90 days it's clear that the role isn't a good fit, we'll have a conversation about it. But Mr. Hale, I've been in this business for 23 years. I'm very good at reading people, and I don't think you're going to fail. You stopped everything to help someone you didn't know, Emily added. You sacrificed something you desperately needed because it was the right thing to do. That tells me you have integrity, and integrity can't be taught. Everything else, the technical skills, the corporate protocols, the industry knowledge, that's all learnable. Malik looked between these two accomplished, powerful women who were offering him something he thought was permanently out of reach. He thought about Imani, about the promises he'd made to her and to himself about building a better life. He thought about the endless cycle of temp work and financial anxiety that had defined the past 3 years. He thought about the moment at the crosswalk when he'd chosen compassion over opportunity, never imagining it might lead here. If I take this position, he said slowly, I need you both to understand that I'm going to work harder than anyone else in that department. I'm going to prove that this wasn't a mistake, not because I doubt your judgment, but because I need to know for myself that I earned my place here. Jennifer extended her hand across the table. Mr. Hale, I wouldn't expect anything less. Do we have a deal? Malik shook her hand, then Emily's, feeling like he was stepping off a cliff into something vast and unknown. Yes, he said, we have a deal. The next hour passed in a blur of paperwork, HR procedures, and orientation scheduling. Malik would start the following Monday, which gave him time to finish out the data entry temp assignment and arrange longer-term childcare for Imani. The benefits package was even better than he had initially understood. Full health coverage, dental, vision, retirement matching, tuition reimbursement if he wanted to finish his bachelor's degree. When Jennifer finally excused herself to another meeting, Malik found himself alone with Emily in the conference room. "Thank you," he said. "I know Jennifer made the final decision, but this wouldn't have happened without you. So, thank you." Emily smiled, but there was something melancholy in it. "You might end up cursing me once you see how demanding this place can be. We have high standards and higher expectations." "I can handle demanding," Malik said. "Demanding, I understand." He hesitated, then decided to risk honesty. "What I don't understand is why you really did this. And please don't tell me it's just because I helped you. There's something else." Emily was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the polished table. "You reminded me of something I'd forgotten," she said finally. "That day when you stopped, you saw a person in crisis and you responded like a human being instead of a professional calculating costs and benefits. You didn't help me because it might advance your career or because you thought I could be useful. You helped because it was right." "That's not exactly rare," Malik said. "It's rarer than you think," Emily replied, and gestured to the building around them. "Especially in environments like this. I've been drowning for months in a culture that values productivity over humanity, that measures worth in billable hours and profit margins. And then there you were, this stranger who sacrificed something precious to make sure I was okay. It mattered, Malik. It mattered more than you know." "Are you doing better?" Malik asked. "Since that day, I mean. Are you taking care of yourself?" The question seemed to catch Emily off guard. She blinked, and for a moment Malik saw past the professional polish to the exhausted, overwhelmed woman from the crosswalk. "I'm trying," she said quietly. "I had a long conversation with my father, set some boundaries, started seeing a therapist. It's a work in progress." "That's good," Malik said. "I'm glad." They stood there in the conference room, two people whose lives had intersected by chance and been altered in ways neither had predicted. Outside the windows, the city sprawled in all directions. Millions of individual stories playing out in parallel, occasionally colliding in moments of unexpected grace. "I should let you go," Emily said. "I'm sure you have things to arrange before Monday." "Yeah," Malik said, and managed a small laugh. "Childcare logistics are going to be interesting." Emily's mouth curved, warm. "For what it's worth, I think you're going to be okay. People who recognize when they need to change, who actually do the hard work of changing, those are the people who make it through." "Right back at you," Malik said, echoing her words from the crosswalk. Malik left the building and stepped out into the July heat, feeling like he'd crossed some invisible threshold. The future he'd been clawing toward had suddenly materialized, handed to him by someone he'd helped without expectation of reward. It should have felt like victory, and it did mostly. But underneath the relief and excitement ran a thread of something else, the weight of responsibility, the awareness that he now had something to lose again. He called Mrs. Chen first, asking if she'd be able to provide full-time care for Imani starting next week. Then he called the temp agency to let them know he wouldn't be available after Friday. Then he called Imani's school to update his employment information for their records. With each call, the reality of the situation became more concrete. This was happening. This was real. Malik picked Imani up from camp that afternoon with a box of the good ice cream bars, the ones he usually couldn't justify buying. "What's the occasion?" she asked, her eyes lighting up. "How do you feel about your dad starting a new job on Monday?" "A real job with benefits and everything?" Imani squealed and threw her arms around his waist. "The interview worked," she said. "They gave you the job?" "Something like that," Malik said, hugging her back, breathing in the scent of summer camp, sunscreen and playground dust and uncomplicated joy. "Things are going to get better, sweetheart, I promise." "You always keep your promises," Imani said with absolute certainty. Malik hoped she was right. He'd made a lot of promises over the years, to her and to himself. Promises about showing up, about providing, about building a life that felt like more than just survival. Maybe finally he'd be able to keep them all. They spent the evening celebrating in their small apartment, Imani chattering excitedly about all the things they'd be able to do now that Daddy had a real job. Better school supplies, maybe a new backpack for second grade, a bed that didn't squeak. Malik listened and made notes and tried not to think too hard about how quickly circumstances could change, how fragile this newfound stability might be. That night, After Imani was asleep, Malik sat at the kitchen table and wrote out a budget based on his new salary. Even after being conservative with the estimates, there was money left over, actual surplus for the first time in 3 years. He could save for emergencies, could build a small cushion against disaster, could breathe without constantly calculating how many days until the next paycheck. The relief was so profound it was almost frightening. Malik's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When he opened it, he found a message from Emily. Wanted to make sure you made it home, okay? Also, wanted to say I'm glad you stopped that day. Not just because of what it led to for you, but because it reminded me that there are still good people in the world. See you Monday. E. Malik stared at the message for a long time before typing a response. Glad I stopped too. Take care of yourself. See you Monday. He set the phone down and looked around their small apartment. The peeling linoleum, the secondhand furniture, the toy box overflowing with Imani's treasures. A framed photo of a beautiful black family, him, Tiana, and baby Imani, sat on the shelf by the kitchen, the edges worn from being moved too many times, but still standing. In a few months, they'd be able to move somewhere better. But for tonight, this space felt almost holy, a launching pad for the future they were about to build. Malik thought about the crosswalk, about the choice that had cost him an interview and somehow impossibly led him here. He thought about the strange mathematics of grace, the way sometimes losing everything was the only way to gain what you really needed. He didn't believe in fate or cosmic justice or divine intervention, but he believed in the accumulation of small choices, in the way character revealed itself in moments of crisis, in the possibility that doing the right thing might occasionally, unexpectedly, lead to something good. Friday passed in a haze of final temp work tasks and mental preparation. Malik trained his replacement on the data entry system, cleaned out his temporary desk space, and said polite goodbyes to people he'd barely gotten to know. The position had been exactly as advertised: boring, isolating, and barely sustainable. He felt no nostalgia about leaving it behind. Saturday, he took Imani shopping for new school supplies, letting her pick out the folders and notebooks she wanted instead of directing her towards the cheapest options. The joy on her face was worth every penny. Sunday, he laid out his clothes for Monday and went over the new employee orientation packet Jennifer had sent him. The Sterling & Associates Employee Handbook was 300 pages of policies and procedures, organizational charts, and mission statements. Malik read every word, determined to show up prepared. He barely slept Sunday night, his mind churning through scenarios and anxieties. What if he couldn't handle the workload? What if the other employees resented his unconventional hiring? What if he made some catastrophic mistake in the first week and proved everyone right who'd ever doubted him? But when Monday morning arrived and Malik dressed in his suit and dropped Imani off at Mrs. Chen's house, he felt something shift. The anxiety was still there, thrumming under his skin, but underneath it ran a deeper current of determination. He'd been given a second chance, an opportunity most people in his position never got. He wasn't going to waste it. The Sterling & Associates lobby felt different now that Malik was walking in as an employee rather than a desperate job candidate. He checked in at reception, received a temporary badge, and was directed to the 7th floor where Jennifer's assistant was waiting to begin orientation. The morning passed in a whirlwind of introductions, system logins, and information overload. Malik met his direct supervisor, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia, who made it clear she had high standards and limited patience for excuses. He met his team members, a mix of experienced coordinators and newer hires who ranged from welcoming to wearily neutral. He received his laptop, his phone, his access cards, and enough passwords to make his head spin. Through it all, he kept his expression professional and his attention Clear's throat-focused, taking notes and asking questions and trying to absorb everything fast enough to be useful. He saw Emily twice, once in the hallway where they exchanged polite nods, and once in a meeting where she was presenting quarterly metrics to the operations team. In professional mode, she was formidable, commanding the room with confidence and precision. Malik watched her and thought about the woman who'd collapsed on a crosswalk, exhausted and overwhelmed, and marveled at the distance between those two versions of the same person. By the time Monday ended, Malik's brain felt stuffed full of information he only half understood. But he'd made it through. Day 1 survived. The week continued in much the same pattern, overwhelming amounts of new information, tasks that required skills he was still developing, moments of panic when he thought he'd made a terrible mistake, but also moments of competence, of successfully navigating a challenge, of earning a nod of approval from Patricia or a friendly smile from a teammate. Malik worked harder than he'd ever worked in his life, arriving early and staying late, taking work home to study after Imani was asleep. He was determined to prove he belonged here, to justify the faith that had been placed in him. Friday afternoon, Jennifer stopped by his desk. "Surviving your first week?" she asked. "Barely," Malik admitted, "but yes. Patricia tells me you're doing well, says you ask good questions and follow through on tasks." Jennifer's expression was approving. "Keep it up, Mr. Hale, you're exactly where you're supposed to be." As she walked away, Malik felt something unclench in his chest. He wasn't failing. He was doing okay, maybe even more than okay. That night, he picked Imani up from Mrs. Chen's and took her out for pizza. Not the cheap frozen kind they usually ate at home, but real restaurant pizza with unlimited soda refills. Imani talked nonstop about her week at camp, and Malik listened with the kind of present attention he hadn't been able to afford when he was constantly stressed about money. This was what stability felt like, he realized. Not the absence of challenges, but the presence of resources to meet them. Not certainty about the future, but confidence that he could handle whatever came. It was a gift he'd never take for granted, because he remembered with crystalline clarity the moment that had made all of this possible. A woman collapsing on a crosswalk, a choice made without calculation, a sacrifice that had somehow impossibly become the thing that saved him. Malik didn't believe in fairy tales, but he was starting to believe in second chances. And he was determined to make this one count. The transition from survival mode to something resembling stability happened so gradually that Malik almost didn't notice it at first. 6 weeks into his position at Sterling & Associates, he woke up one Saturday morning and realized he hadn't checked his bank balance in 3 days. For someone who'd spent 3 years monitoring every dollar with obsessive precision, the shift felt almost disorienting. Imani was still asleep, her rabbit tucked under her chin, her face peaceful in the morning light filtering through their apartment window. Malik lay there watching her breathe and felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not quite contentment, but close. The absence of constant dread, maybe. The knowledge that today's problems wouldn't automatically become tomorrow's catastrophes. They'd been able to afford Imani's dental work. The cavities were filled, the cleaning done, and Malik had paid the bill without having to choose between that and groceries. Small victory maybe, but it felt monumental. His phone buzzed with a message from Patricia. Even on weekends, his supervisor maintained her reputation for relentless efficiency. "Need you to review the Hartman project files before Monday's presentation. Emily will be in the meeting and she'll have questions. Be prepared." Malik had learned quickly that Patricia's management style was built on high expectations and minimal hand-holding. She gave him assignments that stretched his capabilities, then expected him to figure out how to deliver. It was exhausting and occasionally terrifying, but he was learning faster than he thought possible. The Hartman project was a major consulting contract for a tech company looking to restructure their operations. Malik's role was coordinating between the various teams working on different aspects of the proposal, ensuring everyone had the information they needed and deadlines were met. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was essential. And Patricia had made it clear that his performance on this project would factor heavily into his 90-day review, which was coming up in 3 weeks. Malik pushed the thought away and got out of bed. Weekends were precious. 48 hours when he could focus entirely on Imani, when work emails could wait a few hours, when they could pretend to be a normal family doing normal things. He wasn't going to waste this morning angsting about performance reviews. "Daddy!" Imani's sleepy voice drifted from her bed. "Is it pancake day?" Malik smiled. They'd fallen into a Saturday morning routine. "It's pancake day." "With chocolate chips?" she asked, already half sitting up. "With chocolate chips," Malik confirmed, "and with the real syrup." The real syrup. Imani bounced out of bed with the energy unique to 7-year-olds, and they headed to the kitchen together. While Malik mixed batter, Imani set the table, chattering about her friend Sophie's upcoming birthday party and whether she could get a present that wasn't from the dollar store this time. "Sophie's mom invited you too," Imani said, carefully arranging forks and napkins. "She said all the parents are coming. There's going to be pizza and games and everything." Malik had met Sophia's mother exactly once during drop-off at camp. She'd seemed nice enough, friendly in that effortless way people had when they weren't constantly calculating the cost of every interaction. The idea of socializing with other parents, actual socializing, not just the harried exchanges in parking lots and doorways, felt strange and vaguely anxiety-inducing. "When is it?" 2 weeks from Saturday. Can we go, please?" The old Malik would have immediately started calculating whether he could afford both the present and the 2 hours away from side work or job hunting. The new Malik, still adjusting to having actual disposable income, just nodded. "Oh, we can go, and yes, we'll get Sophie a real present." Imani threw her arms around his waist. "You're the best daddy ever." The declaration was so earnest, so uncomplicated by the realities Malik wrestled with daily, that it made his throat tight. "I love you too, sweetheart." They spent the morning eating pancakes and watching cartoons, and Malik tried to be present instead of mentally reviewing project files. But by afternoon, with Imani absorbed in coloring at the kitchen table, he found himself pulling out his laptop and diving into the Hartman materials. The scope of the project was larger than anything he'd handled before. Multiple departments, complex timelines, stakeholders with competing priorities. Malik had spent the past 2 weeks building spreadsheets and communication protocols, trying to create systems that would keep everyone aligned. But looking at the presentation draft Patricia had sent him, he could see gaps in the logic, places where the proposal didn't quite hang together. Emily would definitely have questions. Clear his throat. She had questions about everything, a sharp analytical mind that caught inconsistencies others missed. Malik had watched her in meetings, the way she could dismantle an argument with a few precisely placed queries. It was impressive and slightly terrifying. He spent the next 3 hours revising the presentation, strengthening weak points, and adding supporting data. Imani moved from coloring to playing with her toys to requesting a snack, and Malik handled it all on autopilot, his mind absorbed in project details. "Daddy," Imani said, standing beside his chair, her expression somewhere between resigned and reproachful. "You're working again." Malik closed the laptop with a guilty start. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. You're right. No more work today. You said weekends were for us." "I did say that." He pulled her onto his lap. "And I meant it. I'm done now, I promise." But the truth was, he was having trouble finding the boundary between dedication and obsession. The job he'd been given felt both like an opportunity and a test, and he was terrified of failing it. Every project, every task, every interaction carried the weight of proving he belonged here. Patricia had noticed. 2 weeks ago, she'd cornered him after a late evening email exchange. "Hale, you're going to burn yourself out before your probation period ends if you keep this pace." "I'm fine," Malik had insisted. "Just want to make sure everything's done right." There's a difference between thoroughness and anxiety. Patricia's expression had been uncharacteristically gentle. "You were hired because we believe you can do this job. Start believing it too." Easy advice to give. Harder to internalize when you'd spent years on the edge of financial disaster. Sunday passed in a similar pattern. Quality time with Imani punctuated by work thoughts, Malik couldn't quite silence. They went to the park where Imani played on the swings while Malik pushed her and tried not to think about Monday's presentation. They made spaghetti for dinner, Imani's favorite, and Malik let her pick the movie for their evening routine. But after she was asleep, he was back at his laptop, refining slides and rehearsing talking points. Monday morning arrived gray and humid, the kind of weather that made Malik's cheap suit stick to his skin during the bus commute. He arrived at the office 40 minutes early, as had become his habit, and used the quiet time to review materials one final time. The conference room for the Hartman presentation was the same one where he'd met with Jennifer and Emily 2 months ago. Malik set up his laptop, tested the projector connection, and arranged hard copies of the proposal around the table. Patricia arrived 15 minutes before the meeting, gave everything a critical once-over, and nodded approval. Good preparation. Remember, if Emily asks something you don't know, don't try to bluff. Tell her you'll follow up with the specifics. Got it. Inhale, breathe, you know this material. The team filtered in over the next 10 minutes. Representatives from consulting, operations, finance, and strategic planning. Emily arrived exactly on time, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression of professional neutrality that gave nothing away. She'd been cordial but distant over the past 6 weeks, their interactions limited to work context. Malik appreciated the boundary even as he sometimes wondered what she was thinking, whether she was satisfied with the hiring decision or having second thoughts about advocating for him. Patricia called the meeting to order and Malik launched into the presentation. He'd practiced the delivery enough times that it flowed smoothly, hitting the key points about project scope, resource allocation, timeline management, and expected outcomes. The team asked clarifying questions as he went, and Malik answered them with growing confidence. Then Emily spoke up. Malik, walk me through the risk mitigation strategy on page 12. Specifically, how you're planning to handle potential delays from the client's internal approval processes. Malik pulled up the relevant slide, but even as he started explaining, he could see the gap in their planning. They'd identified the risk, but hadn't really developed a robust contingency plan. We've built buffer time into the schedule, he said, then stopped himself. Patricia's advice echoed in his head. Don't bluff? Actually, Malik said and felt his heartbeat spike. That's not sufficient. Looking at this now, we need a more structured approach to managing client-side bottlenecks. I can work with the consulting team to develop specific escalation protocols and alternative approval pathways. Emily's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. How quickly can you have that ready? End of day tomorrow. Make it happen. She made a note on her tablet. What else are we missing? The question shifted the dynamic from presentation to working session. For the next hour, the team dissected the proposal, identifying weaknesses and brainstorming solutions. Malik took notes frantically, his initial presentation completely abandoned in favor of collaborative problem solving. By the time the meeting ended, they had a substantially stronger proposal, and Malik had a list of action items that would keep him busy for the next week. He felt simultaneously energized and overwhelmed. As people filed out, Emily lingered behind. That was good work, she said quietly, especially the part where you acknowledge the gap instead of trying to cover it. But Patricia told me not to bluff with you, Malik said, still catching his breath. Emily smiled. Patricia's smart, but that wasn't just following advice. That was integrity. Same thing I saw at the crosswalk. The reference caught Malik off guard. They'd maintained such careful professional distance that he'd almost forgotten the personal history between them. How are you doing? He asked. Really doing? Emily glanced towards the door, making sure they were alone. Better. Some days are harder than others, but I'm managing. Therapy helps. Setting boundaries helps. She paused. Having one person in this building who sees me as a human being instead of just the CEO's daughter helps too. You've got more than one person like that, Malik said, but I'm glad I can be on that list. How about you? Emily asked. How's the adjustment been? Patricia says you're exceeding expectations, but you also look exhausted every time I see you. Malik hesitated, then decided on honesty. It's hard not to feel like I'm constantly trying to prove I deserve to be here. Like one mistake will confirm everyone's suspicion that I was a charity case. Malik, nobody thinks that. And even if they did, who cares? You're doing the work. You're delivering results. That's all that matters. Easy to say when you've never had to doubt your place. The words came out sharper than Malik intended, and Emily's expression shifted. Not anger, but something more complicated. You think I've never doubted my place? Her voice was soft, but carried an edge. I've spent my entire career wondering if every opportunity, every promotion, every bit of recognition was earned, or just handed to me because of my name. Trust me, imposter syndrome isn't exclusive to people who started with nothing. Malik felt immediately ashamed. I'm sorry, he said. That was out of line. No, it wasn't, Emily replied. It was honest. She moved to the window, looking out over the city. We both struggle with versions of the same thing, wondering if we're really good enough or if we're just benefiting from circumstances beyond our control. The difference is I had a safety net if I fell. You didn't. So, yeah, the stakes feel different for you. But the doubt, that's universal. They stood in silence for a moment, two people navigating different versions of the same insecurity in a building full of people who seemed supremely confident in their own competence. For what it's worth, Emily said finally, I don't regret pushing for your hiring, not for a second. You've earned your place here, Malik. Start letting yourself believe it. She left before he could respond, and Malik stood alone in the conference room, her words echoing in his head. The rest of the week was a blur of work on the Hartman proposal and his regular coordination responsibilities. Malik stayed late 3 nights in a row, building out the risk mitigation protocols Emily had requested and ensuring every detail was airtight. Patricia reviewed his work with her usual critical eye and pronounced it acceptable, which Malik had learned was her version of high praise. Amani noticed his increased hours despite his best efforts to hide them. You're tired all the time now, she said Thursday night while he helped her with homework. Like you were before the new job? The observation stung because it was accurate. Malik had promised himself he wouldn't fall back into the pattern of overwork that had characterized his temp job years. But here he was, sacrificing sleep and presence for the sake of proving himself. You're right, he admitted. I've been working too much. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Is it because you're scared they'll fire you? The perceptiveness of children was sometimes devastating. Yeah, Malik said quietly. But you're really good at your job, Amani insisted. Mrs. Chen says. Mrs. Chen doesn't work with me. No, but she says you must be good because we have the fancy ice cream now and you smile more. Amani looked up from her math worksheet. You do smile more, Daddy, even when you're tired. Malik pulled her into a hug, overwhelmed by her simple wisdom. She was right. Despite the exhaustion, despite the anxiety about his probation period, he was fundamentally happier than he'd been in years. The constant dread that had shadowed every moment for so long had lifted, replaced by normal work stress and manageable challenges. I'm going to do better, he promised. No more late nights this week. We'll have our weekend time just like we're supposed to. Can we go to the library? Imani asked. I want to get new books. Absolutely. Saturday morning library trip. It's a date. Friday afternoon, Malik submitted the final Hartman proposal materials to Patricia. She reviewed them during their weekly check-in meeting, her expression giving away nothing as she scrolled through page after page. This is comprehensive, she said finally. Thorough risk analysis, realistic timelines, clear accountability structures. Well done, Hale. The praise felt disproportionately meaningful. Malik had to resist the urge to ask if she really meant it, if she thought it was good enough, if there was anything else he should fix. Thank you, he said instead. The team contributed a lot of good ideas. They did, Patricia agreed, but you coordinated it all and made sure nothing fell through the cracks. That's your job, and you did it well. She closed her laptop. Emily was impressed with how you handled the meeting Monday, said you showed real integrity, acknowledging the gaps in our initial plan. Just seemed like the right thing to do. It was, Patricia said. It's also rare. She studied him with those sharp eyes that seemed to see more than Malik was comfortable with. Speaking of which, your 90-day review is scheduled for next Friday, 2 o'clock. Malik's stomach dropped. He'd known it was coming, had been mentally preparing, but having the actual date made it suddenly terrifyingly real. Anything I should know going into it? He asked. Just be ready to talk about your experience so far, challenges you faced, goals for your continued development. Patricia's expression softened slightly. And Hale, stop looking so terrified. This isn't an execution. It's a conversation. A conversation that determines whether I keep my job, Malik said before he could stop himself. Patricia's mouth twitched, almost a smile. A conversation that confirms what I already know, she said, that you're exactly where you should be. She stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Go home, Hale. It's Friday afternoon. Spend time with your daughter. The work will still be here Monday. Malik took the advice, leaving the office at a reasonable hour for the first time all week. He picked Imani up from Mrs. Chen's and took her to the park, where they fed ducks stale bread and talked about her upcoming second grade year and whether she might want to try soccer or dance classes now that they could afford extracurriculars. Really? Imani's eyes were wide with disbelief. I can pick? Really, what sounds fun to you? Dance, she said immediately. Sophie does dance, and she says it's so fun, and they get to wear sparkly costumes for the recital. The sparkly costumes probably cost a fortune, but Malik found himself not caring. Imani had spent too much of her young life hearing, "We can't afford that," in response to perfectly reasonable requests. If she wanted to wear a sparkly costume and learn to dance, then she would dance. Then we'll look into dance classes, Malik said. We can visit some studios, see which one you like best. Imani threw her arms around him with such force that they both nearly toppled over. Thank you, Daddy, she said. This is the best day ever. Malik held her and watched the ducks paddle across the pond and tried to hold on to this feeling, the simple joy of being able to give his daughter something she wanted. The absence of crushing anxiety about money, the sense that maybe, possibly, they were going to be okay. Saturday morning, they made good on the library promise. Malik let Imani check out 10 books, the maximum allowed, and didn't stress about late fees or damaged covers. They stopped for coffee on the way home. Actual coffee from a cafe, not the instant stuff he made at home. And Imani got hot chocolate with whipped cream. Fancy, she pronounced, and Malik couldn't help but laugh. Yeah, kiddo, he said. Fancy. They spent the afternoon reading together on the couch, Imani working through an illustrated chapter book, while Malik finally cracked open a novel he'd been meaning to read for months. No work emails, no project files. Just the quiet pleasure of a Saturday afternoon with nowhere to be and nothing urgent demanding his attention. Sunday, they went to Sophie's birthday party. Malik had bought a gift that was thoughtful without being excessive, an art set with colored pencils and a sketchbook, and watched Imani present it with pride instead of embarrassment. Sophie's mother, Karen, greeted him warmly and introduced him to other parents. And Malik found himself in actual conversations about schools and neighborhoods and the challenges of raising kids in the city. It felt normal, remarkably, wonderfully normal. Your first time at one of these? Karen asked, handing him a beer from the cooler. That obvious? You've got the look of someone who's still surprised to be here. She smiled kindly. I remember that feeling. Single parent, Malik said. Widower, 3 years now. I'm sorry, that must be incredibly hard. It was, Malik admitted. It's getting easier. I got a new job recently. Better pay, better hours. It's making a real difference. That's wonderful. What do you do? Program coordinator at Sterling and Associates, Malik said. Operations department. Karen's eyebrows rose. Sterling? That's a great company. My husband works there actually, in the consulting division, Mark Weber. You might have crossed paths. Malik recognized the name from the Hartman project team. We've been in meetings together, Malik said. Small world, isn't it? You should come to the company family picnic next month, Karen said. They do it every August, and it's actually pretty fun. Good chance to meet people outside the office context. The idea of attending a corporate family event, of being part of that world, still felt slightly surreal, but Malik found himself nodding. We'll be there. The conversation drifted to other topics, and Malik relaxed into it, discovering that he actually enjoyed talking to other adults about non-work subjects. He'd been so isolated for so long, his entire social world reduced to brief exchanges with neighbors and Imani's teachers. Having real conversations with people who didn't know his whole sad backstory felt liberating. By the time they left, Imani was exhausted and happy, clutching a goodie bag and chattering about how much fun she'd had. Malik felt the same way, though he couldn't quite articulate why. Something about being included, maybe. About feeling like they belonged to a community instead of just surviving on its margins. Monday morning brought him back to reality with the usual rush of meetings and deadlines. The Hartman proposal was moving forward, which meant coordinating presentations for the client and ensuring all deliverables were on track. Malik juggled conference calls and email chains and last-minute requests with growing confidence. His systems were holding up under pressure. Tuesday afternoon, Emily stopped by his desk. Got a minute? Of course. Malik saved his work and followed her to one of the small meeting rooms scattered throughout the floor. Emily closed the door and turned to face him, her expression more serious than usual. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I need you to hear it as your colleague, not as the person who helped get you hired." Malik's stomach tightened. "Okay. My father is planning to attend your 90-day review on Friday." "What?" Malik blurted. "Why?" "Because I told him about you," Emily said, frustration threaded through her voice. "About what happened at the crosswalk, about your performance here, about how you're exactly the kind of employee we should be hiring." She exhaled. "He wants to meet you himself. See if you live up to my description." "That's not, Emily, that's going to make everything so much more complicated." I know." She looked genuinely apologetic. "I tried to talk him out of it, but when he gets an idea in his head..." She trailed off helplessly. "I'm sorry, I thought you should know ahead of time rather than being ambushed." Malik sank into a chair, his mind racing. A 90-day review was already high stakes enough without adding the CEO into the mix. Richard Carter was a legend in the consulting world, known for building Sterling and Associates from a small firm into a major player through sheer force of will and strategic brilliance. The idea of being evaluated by him personally was terrifying. "What does he want from me?" Malik asked. "Shuts it in." "Honestly," Emily said, "I'm not sure. He's been talking a lot lately about values-based hiring, about finding people with character instead of just credentials. I think you represent something to him, some validation of that philosophy." She paused. "But it's also possible he wants to verify that I wasn't just being sentimental, that you really are as good as I've said." "No pressure then," Malik muttered. "I know this is unfair," Emily said. "You should be evaluated on your work performance, not on whether you meet my father's expectations for what a values-based hire looks like." She leaned forward. "But for what it's worth, Patricia's assessment will carry the most weight. My father trusts her judgment absolutely." "And what's Patricia's assessment?" "You'll have to ask her," Emily said, "but I haven't heard any concerns." Malik tried to take comfort in that, but his mind was already spiraling through worst-case scenarios. What if he froze up in front of Richard Carter? What if the CEO decided Malik was proof that Emily's judgment was compromised by emotion? What if this whole thing blew up and cost him the job he'd worked so hard to prove he could handle? Hey. Emily's voice cut through the spiral. "Look at me. You've done excellent work here. You've exceeded expectations on every project. You've earned your place. Nothing that happens in that review is going to change those facts. Unless your father decides I'm not what Sterling and Associates needs." "Then he'd be wrong," Emily said, fierce certainty in her voice. "And I'd tell him so." The intensity surprised Malik. Emily had been professional and encouraging, but this felt like something more, like she was genuinely invested in his success beyond just validating her own hiring recommendation. "Why does this matter so much to you?" Malik asked. Emily was quiet for a long moment. "Because you reminded me why I wanted to work here in the first place," she said finally, "before the politics and the pressure and the constant need to prove myself. You showed me what it looks like to make decisions based on values instead of calculating advantage." She met his eyes. "And I need that reminder. This place needs that reminder." "So yes," she continued, "I'm invested in your success, not just because it validates my judgment, but because you being here makes this company better, makes me better." Malik didn't know what to say to that. The weight of Emily's expectations felt both honoring and terrifying. "I'll do my best," he said finally. "I know you will," Emily replied. "You always do." The rest of the week took on a surreal quality as Malik prepared for Friday's review while trying to maintain his normal workload. He compiled documentation of his completed projects, prepared talking points about his development goals, and rehearsed answers to potential questions until the words lost all meaning. Thursday night, he barely slept. Imani noticed at breakfast Friday morning. "Big day?" she asked, offering him half her toast. "The biggest," Malik said. "Remember I told you about my 90-day review, the meeting that decides if I get to keep working at the new job?" "You're going to do great, Daddy," Imani said with 7-year-old certainty. "You always do great at important things." Malik wished he had half her confidence. The morning crawled by in a haze of distraction and mounting anxiety. Malik accomplished almost nothing productive, his mind too absorbed in running through scenarios. Patricia noticed during their morning check-in, but said nothing, just gave him a look that was equal parts sympathy and expectation. At 1:45, Malik gathered his materials and headed to the conference room. Patricia was already there, reviewing something on her laptop. She looked up when he entered. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad." "Feels like it," Malik admitted. "It's not." Patricia's voice was firm. "Sit down, Hale. Let's talk before the others arrive." Malik sat, gripping his folder of documentation like a lifeline. "I've been doing this job for 12 years, Patricia said. I've conducted more 90-day reviews than I can count, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that yours is going to be one of the easiest." "Emily said the CEO is coming," Malik said. "He is," Patricia replied, "and you're going to be fine." She leaned forward. "You've done exceptional work, Malik. You've tackled every challenge I've thrown at you. You've built strong relationships with your teammates, and you've shown exactly the kind of character and judgment this company values. Richard Carter is going to see that immediately." "What if he doesn't?" "Then I'll make sure he does," Patricia said. "That's my job." She softened slightly. "Trust yourself, Hale. Trust the work you've done. And remember, you've already survived much harder things than a performance review." The reminder steadied him. Patricia was right. He'd survived Tiana's death, survived years of poverty and instability, survived every setback and disappointment that had brought him to this moment. A meeting with the CEO was just another challenge. He could handle it. At 2 o'clock exactly, the door opened. Jennifer Walsh entered first, followed by Emily, and behind them, a man in his early 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Richard Carter extended his hand to Malik. "Mr. Hale," he said, "I've been looking forward to meeting you." Malik stood and shook his hand, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. Mr. Carter," Malik said, "the feeling is mutual. Please sit." Richard took the seat at the head of the table, Jennifer and Emily flanking him, while Patricia remained at Malik's side. The positioning felt deliberate, like they were being evaluated as a unit rather than Malik alone. Richard opened a folder, Malik's personnel file, he realized with a lurch of anxiety, and spent a moment reviewing it in silence. Then he looked up, his expression unreadable. "Tell me something, Mr. Hale. Why do you think you're here?" The question was so unexpected that Malik almost laughed. "Because I stopped to help someone who needed it," Malik said. "And it turned out that someone had the power to give me an opportunity I desperately needed." "That's the simple version." Richard's tone didn't shift. "What's the complicated version?" Malik glanced at Patricia, who gave him the slightest nod of encouragement. "The complicated version," Malik said, "is that I think your daughter saw something in me that traditional hiring processes might have missed, and you're here to determine whether she was right or whether sentiment clouded her judgment." Richard Carter smiled. "I like directness," he said. "Yes, that's exactly why I'm here. So let's find out if she was right." The silence that followed Richard Carter's declaration stretched just long enough to make Malik's palms sweat. He forced himself to maintain eye contact with the CEO, refusing to look away despite every instinct screaming at him to show deference. Patricia broke the tension by sliding a document across the table. "These are Malik's performance metrics for his first 90 days. Project completion rates, team feedback scores, quality assessments, all significantly above average for someone in his position." Richard picked up the document but didn't look at it. His eyes remained fixed on Malik. "Numbers tell part of the story," he said. "I'm more interested in the parts they don't tell. Walk me through the Hartman proposal process. I understand you coordinated that effort." Malik took a breath and launched into a summary of the project, hitting the key points about timeline management, stakeholder coordination, and risk mitigation. He kept his tone professional and factual, resisting the urge to oversell or embellish. When he reached the part about the Monday meeting with Emily, he didn't shy away from describing how he'd acknowledged the gaps in their initial planning. "So you essentially told the team," Richard said, voice neutral, "including my daughter, that your work wasn't good enough." "I told them the truth," Malik replied. "The risk mitigation section had a significant weakness. Pretending otherwise would have damaged the proposal and wasted everyone's time." "Most people in your position," Richard said, especially during their probation period, would have defended the work and hoped no one noticed the gap. Most people in my position wouldn't have been given this opportunity in the first place, Malik said. I'm not interested in keeping this job by cutting corners or being dishonest. If that's what's required, then this isn't the right fit anyway. Jennifer's eyebrows rose slightly. Emily looked like she was trying not to smile. Patricia's expression remained carefully neutral, but Malik thought he detected approval in her eyes. Richard leaned back in his chair, studying Malik with an intensity that felt like being X-rayed. You have a daughter, correct? Richard asked. 7 years old, Malik said, still trying to keep up with the shifting current of the conversation. Richard recited the facts from Malik's file without looking at it. Amani, single father, widower, been raising her alone for 3 years while working a series of temporary positions that barely paid your bills. He paused. That's a hell of a burden to carry while trying to build a career. It's not a burden, Malik said, and his voice surprised him with how steady it was. She's my daughter. Taking care of her is the most important thing I do. Even when it cost you opportunities, Richard pressed, jobs you couldn't take because of the schedule, positions you couldn't pursue because you needed to be available for school pickups and sick days. Malik felt the conversation shifting into territory he didn't entirely understand. Yes, Malik said, even then, a job that requires me to fail as a father isn't worth having. And yet, Richard said, you missed your initial interview here because you stopped to help a stranger, knowing you desperately needed that job, knowing your daughter was depending on you to secure better employment. Richard's voice carried a challenge. How do you reconcile choosing to help Emily with your responsibility to your daughter? The question felt like a trap, but Malik couldn't identify which answer would spring it. He decided, as he always did, on honesty. I don't think those things are in conflict, Malik said. Yes, I needed that job. But what kind of example would I be setting for Amani if I taught her that desperation justifies ignoring someone in crisis? That getting ahead matters more than helping people who need it? Malik shook his head. I want my daughter to grow up knowing that character matters more than convenience. I can't teach her that if I don't live it myself. Even when living it costs you everything? Especially then, Malik said. The choices that matter most are the ones that cost us something. Richard was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to Patricia. What's your assessment? Can he handle increased responsibility? Malik's heart stuttered. Increased responsibility? He'd been bracing for evaluation of whether he could keep his current position, not discussion of advancement. Patricia didn't hesitate. Absolutely. Malik has demonstrated leadership capacity that exceeds his current role. He identifies problems proactively, communicates effectively across departments, and earns trust from colleagues at all levels. With proper mentorship, he could move into senior coordination or even junior management within a year. Emily, Richard said, and looked at his daughter, your evaluation. Emily met her father's gaze steadily. I stand by everything I said when I recommended hiring Malik. He brings exactly the kind of integrity and judgment we claim to value but rarely prioritize in our hiring processes. Beyond that, he's proven to be an exceptional employee who makes everyone around him better. I'd advocate for his advancement without reservation. Jennifer, the COO, nodded. I've observed Malik in several cross-departmental meetings. He has a rare combination of analytical skills and emotional intelligence. He reads people well, anticipates needs, and manages conflict without drama. Those are qualities we can develop in terms of specific expertise, but the foundation is already there. Richard turned back to Malik. You're hearing 3 senior leaders tell me you're ready for more responsibility, he said. How do you feel about that? Malik struggled to process what was happening. This review had gone completely off script from what he'd anticipated. Honestly, Malik said, overwhelmed. I've been so focused on proving I can handle my current job that I haven't thought much beyond that. That's because you've been operating in survival mode for 3 years, Richard said. Patricia tells me you regularly stay late, take work home, respond to emails at all hours, that you're consistently the first person in the office and often the last to leave. I want to do good work, Malik said. There's a difference between dedication and desperation, Mr. Hale, Richard replied. The question is whether you can recognize that difference and adjust accordingly. Richard closed the personnel file. Huss, here's what's going to happen. Your probationary period is successfully complete. You're now a permanent employee of Sterling and Associates with all corresponding benefits and protections. Malik's breath caught. Richard continued, voice calm, decisive. Additionally, we're moving you into a senior coordinator position with a salary adjustment to $62,000 annually, effective immediately. Malik felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. $62,000. That was nearly $30,000 more than he'd made in his best year ever. That was enough to move to a better neighborhood, to afford dance classes and birthday parties and all the normal childhood experiences Imani had been missing. That was life-changing money. I don't know what to say, Malik managed. Say you'll accept the position, Jennifer said, a slight smile in her voice, and say you'll work with Patricia to develop a sustainable work-life balance so you don't burn out before we can benefit from your full potential. I accept, Malik said, and his voice shook despite his best efforts. And I will. Thank you, all of you. He looked around the table at these people who'd taken a chance on him, who were now doubling down on that investment. I won't let you down. We know, Patricia said. That's why we're promoting you. Richard stood and everyone else followed suit. Mr. Hale, Richard said, I have one more question before we conclude. Malik's pulse jumped again. Why do you think Emily collapsed that day at the crosswalk? The question was so unexpected that Malik glanced at Emily before answering. She looked just as surprised as he felt. From what she told me, Malik said carefully, she was working herself into the ground, trying to prove she belonged here, trying to demonstrate she'd earned her position rather than being handed it because of her name. And did you think less of her when you learned who her father was? No, Malik said immediately. If anything, I respected her more. It's harder to prove yourself when people assume your success is unearned. Richard nodded slowly. My daughter nearly killed herself trying to meet standards I didn't even realize I was imposing, Richard said. Standards that said credentials and pedigree mattered more than character and judgment. That the right background was more important than the right values. He looked at Emily with an expression that was equal parts love and regret. Watching her collapse, literally and figuratively, made me realize we'd lost our way. That Sterling and Associates had become exactly the kind of place that would walk past someone in crisis because stopping might be inconvenient. Dad, Emily started, but Richard held up a hand. Let me finish. When Emily told me about you, about what you'd sacrificed to help her, I was skeptical. I thought she was being sentimental, that she'd elevated a simple act of kindness into something more significant than it was. Richard's gaze returned to Malik. But watching you these past 90 days, seeing the work you've done and the way you've conducted yourself, I realized she was right. Character matters. Integrity matters. And we need to build a company culture that recognizes and rewards those qualities instead of accidentally punishing them. He extended his hand to Malik again. Thank you, Mr. Hale, Richard said. Not just for helping my daughter, but for reminding this organization what we're supposed to stand for. Malik shook his hand, still processing everything that had just happened. Thank you, Malik said, for giving me the chance to prove it. After Richard and Jennifer left, Malik sank back into his chair, feeling like he'd just survived something intense and transformative. Patricia gathered her materials with brisk efficiency. Congratulations, Hale, she said. You've earned this. She paused at the door. But I meant what I said about work-life balance. I'm going to be monitoring your hours, and if I see you falling back into unsustainable patterns, we're going to have a conversation. Clear? Crystal clear, Malik said. Good. Patricia nodded once. Now go call your daughter and tell her the good news. I'm sure she's been worried. After Patricia left, Malik found himself alone with Emily. She was still sitting across from him, an expression on her face he couldn't quite read. That was intense, Malik said finally. Emily laughed, a slightly shaky sound. That's one word for it. I had no idea my father was planning to turn your review into a referendum on company values. Did you know about the promotion? Malik asked. Not specifically, Emily admitted. I knew they were discussing it, but I didn't know he'd decided to announce it today. She leaned forward. Malik, you deserve this. I know it probably feels overwhelming, but you've genuinely earned it through your work here. This isn't charity or sentiment. Malik swallowed. Your father said you nearly killed yourself trying to prove you belonged, he said, watching her carefully. Is that true? Emily's expression shifted, vulnerability breaking through her professional composure. Yeah, she said quietly. It's true. I was working 16-hour days, 7 days a week, barely sleeping or eating, telling myself that if I just worked hard enough, exceeded every expectation, eventually people would stop seeing me as Richard Carter's daughter and start seeing me as Emily Carter. Competent professional. She smiled sadly. And then I collapsed on a crosswalk and realized I was killing myself for the approval of people whose opinions shouldn't matter that much. But you're doing better now, Malik said. I am, Emily said. Therapy helps. So does having actual boundaries. She met his eyes. And so does having at least one person in this building who sees me as a human being instead of a resume or a last name. You asked me once why this mattered so much to me, Emily continued, why I was so invested in your success. The truth is, watching you navigate this place with your integrity intact reminds me why I wanted to work here. You make me want to be better. Make me believe that maybe we can build something here that's actually worth the sacrifices we make for it. Malik didn't know what to say to that. The weight of Emily's expectations, her hope that he represented something meaningful, felt both honoring and overwhelming. I'm just trying to do good work and take care of my daughter, Malik said. I'm not sure I'm equipped to be anyone's inspiration. That's exactly why you are one, Emily said. She stood, smoothing her skirt. Anyway, congratulations on the promotion. You're going to be great in the new role. She hesitated, then softened. And Malik, thank you for everything. She left before he could respond, and Malik sat alone in the conference room, trying to process everything that had just happened. 3 months ago, he had been a desperate single father, barely keeping his head above water, cobbling together temp jobs and rationing good cheese. Now he was a senior coordinator at a respected consulting firm, making more money than he'd ever imagined, with a CEO who'd personally endorsed his character and colleagues who believed in his potential. It felt unreal. Like any moment he might wake up and find himself back in that cramped apartment with nothing but rejection emails and mounting bills. His phone buzzed with a text from Imani. Mrs. Chen must have let her use her phone. Did you get to keep your job? Malik smiled and typed back. I got to keep it, and I got a promotion. We're celebrating tonight. Where do you want to go for dinner? The response was immediate. Anywhere? The fancy place with the breadsticks, Malik typed back. He laughed out loud. The fancy place was a mid-range Italian restaurant they'd passed dozens of times, but never been able to afford. Imani had been fascinated by the breadsticks in the window display since she was 5. The fancy place it is. I love you, sweetheart, he typed. I love you too, Daddy. I knew you would do great. Malik put his phone away and headed back to his desk where his computer screen showed 17 new emails. His first instinct was to dive in immediately, to start working through them with the same frantic energy he'd brought to every task for the past 90 days. Instead, he closed his laptop. Patricia's words echoed in his head. There was a difference between dedication and desperation. For 3 months, Malik had been operating on desperation, terrified that any moment of relaxation might cost him everything. But he'd passed his review. He'd been promoted. The job was secure. Maybe it was time to start believing that. He left the office at 5 o'clock for the first time since starting at Sterling and Associates. The summer evening was still bright and warm, the city alive with people heading home or out to happy hour. Malik walked to the bus stop with his shoulders relaxed, his mind quiet, and called Imani on the way. Masur Sol, hey, sweetheart, he said. What do you say we pick you up early from Mrs. Chen's and go get those breadsticks? The squeal of delight that came through the phone made Malik smile wider than he had in weeks, maybe years. The Italian restaurant was everything Imani had imagined and more. The breadsticks were warm and garlicky. The pasta was generous, and the waiter brought her a Shirley Temple with extra cherries. When Malik explained they were celebrating, Imani told him about her day at camp in exhaustive detail, and Malik listened with full attention, not checking his phone even once. Daddy, Imani asked around a mouthful of spaghetti, are we rich now? We're not rich, sweetheart, Malik said, but we're doing okay. Better than okay. Does this mean I can really take dance classes? It means you can take dance classes, Malik said, and we can move to a better apartment, and I can stop worrying so much about money all the time. Imani considered this seriously. You worry a lot about money. I did, Malik admitted. I probably won't stop completely, but it's going to be better now. Good, Imani said. I don't like it when you're worried. You get all quiet and your forehead does the wrinkly thing. Malik laughed and reached across the table to ruffle her curls. I'll try to keep the wrinkly thing to a minimum. They ordered dessert, tiramisu, that Imani pronounced fancy and weird but good, and walked home through the warm evening instead of taking the bus. Their apartment building looked shabbier than usual in the golden light, and Malik found himself mentally calculating how long before they could afford to move somewhere nicer. Maybe by the end of summer. Definitely before Imani started second grade. That night, after Imani was asleep, Malik sat at the kitchen table and did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He made a budget that included savings. Real savings, not just whatever few dollars happened to be left at the end of the month. Money set aside for emergencies, for Imani's future, for the unexpected crises that inevitably came. The numbers worked. They actually worked. Even after accounting for a better apartment, dance classes, and building an emergency fund, there was money left over. Not a fortune, but enough to breathe. Enough to live instead of just survive. Malik closed his laptop and sat in the quiet darkness of their apartment, letting the reality settle into his bones. They were going to be okay. After 3 years of struggling and scraping and barely holding on, they were finally, genuinely going to be okay. The weekend passed in a haze of celebration and apartment hunting. Malik had explained to Imani that they were going to look for a new place to live, and she'd approached the task with 7-year-old seriousness, making a list of requirements that included a pink room, a park nearby, and space for dance practice. They visited 6 apartments on Saturday, ranging from barely better than their current place to significantly out of Malik's budget. But the 4th one, a 2-bedroom in a safe neighborhood with a small park 2 blocks away and a community center that offered dance classes, felt right the moment they walked in. This is it, Imani announced, spinning in the empty living room. This is our new home. We haven't even seen the bedrooms yet, Malik said, smiling despite himself. Don't need to, she said with absolute certainty. I can feel it. This is the one. The landlord, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes, smiled at Imani's certainty. She's got good instincts, the woman said. This is a solid building, quiet neighbors, good schools nearby. When would you be looking to move in? Malik did rapid mental math. First month, last month, security deposit. Even with his raise, it would take most of his savings. But they could do it. They could actually do this. End of August, Malik said. That would give me time to save up for the move and get my daughter settled before school starts. End of August works, the landlord said. Let me get you an application. They filled out the paperwork at a coffee shop, Imani drinking hot chocolate while Malik provided references and employment information. Writing Senior Coordinator Sterling and Associates in the employment section felt surreal. 3 months ago, he would have had to list a temp agency and hope they didn't check too carefully. The approval came Monday afternoon. Malik was in a meeting when his phone buzzed with the email, and he had to excuse himself to read it twice and make sure he wasn't hallucinating. Application approved. Lease ready for signature. Congratulations on your new home. He forwarded it to Mrs. Chen with a brief explanation, and she responded immediately with a string of celebration emojis and an offer to help with the move. The news seemed to unlock something in Malik's chest that had been tight for years. They had a home. A real home. In a safe neighborhood where Imani could play outside and attend a good school and take dance classes at the community center down the street. It was everything he had been working toward, everything he'd sacrificed for, manifesting in a simple email confirmation. That evening, he told Imani over dinner. Actual cooked dinner, not cereal or instant noodles. We got the apartment, Malik said. The one you liked. We're going to move in at the end of August. Imani's fork clattered to her plate. Really? The one with the park? The one with the park, Malik confirmed. And the community center 2 blocks away offers dance classes starting in September. I already called and got you enrolled. Imani launched herself out of her chair and into his arms with enough force to nearly knock him over. Thank you, Daddy, she whispered into his shirt. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Malik held her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and feeling the weight of 3 years of struggle finally lift from his shoulders. "You're welcome, sweetheart," he said. "You deserve this. We both do." The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and preparation. Malik's new role as senior coordinator came with expanded responsibilities, managing larger projects, mentoring junior coordinators, serving on cross-departmental teams. The learning curve was steep, but Patricia's prediction proved accurate. Malik adapted quickly, his natural organizational skills and emotional intelligence translating well to the increased demands. He also, with Patricia's pointed reminders, started maintaining better work-life balance. He left the office by 6 o'clock most days, stopped checking emails after 8 p.m., and took his full lunch breaks instead of eating at his desk. The world didn't end. Projects still got completed. And Malik discovered he actually worked better when he wasn't constantly exhausted. Emily checked in periodically, their conversations gradually shifting from formal professional exchanges to something approaching actual friendship. She'd taken her own advice about boundaries seriously, Malik noticed. She still worked hard, but the desperate edge was gone. She smiled more, looked healthier. "How's the apartment hunt going?" she asked one afternoon when they ended up in the break room at the same time. "Done, actually," Malik said. "We move in 3 weeks. Amani is already planning where everything is going to go." "That's wonderful," Emily said, and there was genuine warmth in her voice. New neighborhood, better schools, safer streets, actual park within walking distance. Malik poured coffee, still getting used to the luxury of the good stuff the office provided. "Still feels a bit surreal." "You've earned it, Malik," Emily said. "Stop waiting for it to be taken away." "Easier said than done when you've spent years having things taken away," Malik replied. Emily was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was soft. "My father told me something after your review," she said. "He said watching you made him realize that sometimes the people who've had to fight hardest for everything are the ones who appreciate it most, who don't take it for granted." She met Malik's eyes. "You're going to be one of the good ones, Malik. The kind of leader people want to work for. Because you remember what it's like to struggle." "I'm not sure I'm leadership material," Malik said. "Patricia thinks you are," Emily replied. "So does Jennifer. So do I." She smiled. "And eventually you're going to start believing it too." The moving day arrived hot and humid, the kind of August weather that made every physical task feel like running through water. Mrs. Chen had recruited her son and his friends to help, and between them and some neighbors from the old building, they managed to transfer Malik's modest collection of furniture and boxes to the new apartment in a single afternoon. Amani supervised the process with 7-year-old authority, directing where boxes should go and insisting her new room be set up first. By evening, they were surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, but sleeping in beds in their new home. Malik stood in the living room after Amani was asleep, looking around at the space that was now theirs. Decent-sized rooms, windows that let in actual light, floors that didn't creak ominously, a kitchen with appliances that all worked. A bathroom with water pressure that didn't fluctuate wildly. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't the kind of place his colleagues at Sterling and Associates probably lived in. But it was safe and clean and theirs. And that was everything. His phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Malik almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Hale," a familiar voice said. "This is Richard Carter. I hope I'm not calling too late."